Exciting news! Last year, BC government announced Bill 44 or small scale multi-unit housing, and just yesterday, City of Surrey has announced some specifics on zoning and what can be built on specific lots. Here you go. So up until now, in the City of Surrey, you were allowed to build a house with a suite, or in very rare occasions, a duplex if the frontage was big enough or the lot size was big enough. But now you are allowed to build a houseplex and or a coach house or a garden suite, and the height of the building is 9 meters for a single family house or 10 meters in floodplain areas like Bridgeview, which is around 29 feet. So you can build like a 9 feet basement or the first ground floor, and then 10 feet on the main floor, and then another 9 feet for the upper floor. And for a duplex, it's a little higher. It's 11 meters or 12 meters for a bridge view or floodplains. And for houseplex, it's the same as a single family house. And coach house or a garden suite, you can only build up to 2 stories. Then that's inclusive of the basement. These are the definitions of new homes added. Feel free to pause and take a look. But garden suite is a typical ground-oriented small house in your backyard. You do not need a back lane, and you do not need a garage to build a garden suite. This is literally a stand-alone small tiny house in your backyard. And the coach house, you do need a garage. It's typically constructed above the garage like a typical laneway house in Vancouver. And duplexes, you already know, 2 side-by-side houses. And houseplex, this is the one which is what's the most exciting. You can build a triplex or a quad or 4plex now. Literally a big, huge, like 6,000-7,000 square foot building with 4 separate entrances. 4 separate families can own separate units. But one thing that sucks is for houseplexes, you need a 18 meter or 60 foot frontage and a lane access. Pretty much like 70 to 80% of Surrey does not have laneway. So unfortunately, you cannot build like a 3plex or a quadplex on most of Surrey lots. Of course, you can still build 4 units that cannot be combined in a one big building and have a big backyard. You can, of course, build a duplex with 2 basement suites or a duplex with a coach house and a garden suite. So you can still build 4 separate units. They just cannot be in one big building if you do not have a back lane. And yes, doesn't matter, even if it's a corner unit, doesn't matter. It needs to have a back lane in order to build a houseplex. And the zoning names are also changing. So your typical RF, which is like 60-70% of Surrey, is changing from RF to R3. And the 40-foot frontage, the smaller ones, RF13, RF12, they're changing to R4. And the tiny lots, RF10, RF9, the ones which typically need a back lane, they're changing the name to R5. So R3 is the biggest, then R4, then R5. Of course, there's other bigger ones as well, but those are usually acreages or at least bigger than 20,000 square foot lots. So we can pretty much ignore those for now. So R3, the typical 7,000, 8,000 square foot lot. R4, typical 4,000, 4,500 square foot lot. And R5 is the typical 3,000 to 3,600 typical small lot on a back alley. And these are the sizes of these new lots. So the RA, again, the bigger acreages, 44,000 square feet or bigger. R1 is 20,000 to an acre. Again, most of these are for like mostly farms, so pretty much ignore these for now. R2, this is a little strange because RF was anything from pretty much like 6,000 square feet to like pretty much an acre, but now R2 and R3 are slightly different. So R2 starts from almost like 8,300 square feet, which is a little weird, but it is what it is. So 8,300 square feet up to almost 20,000 square feet would be R2, and your typical R3 is the same, almost like 5,000 square feet to your typical 7,000, 7,200 square feet. And the R4 is of course your 4,000, and the R5 is the typical one with the back lane. The one that used to be RF9, RF10 is now R5. And of course, you cannot make a 4 to 6plex on every lot. There's some exceptions. Of course, feel free to read yourself, but just overall, it should not be, of course, in a heritage. It should not be a super old heritage house. It cannot. Of course, it needs to have water and sewer, so it cannot just be like super far away in a super small town without water or a septic system. You know, needs to have city sewer, city water, and the lot cannot be bigger than 1 acre. So it's only applicable to smaller lots, smaller than an acre. And of course, if the lot is smaller than 3,000 square feet, that you can not make 4-plex, you can still make 3-plex, and has to be within the urban containment boundary. This is pretty much most of Surrey, so it's not, doesn't really matter. Of course, there's some very far away, like Sullivan Station, like the big acreages without, but honestly, pretty much all of Surrey within urban containment boundary has sewer and water. So wherever septic is present or city water doesn't exist, that's pretty much outside of the urban containment boundary. And of course, it cannot be on a super steep slope or many trees or something weird like easements and stuff. Of course, everything is site specific. So even if it is on a steep slope, doesn't matter. If talk to city, they might allow, they might not. But try to get a flatter lot if possible. And if this is the weirdest one, so you cannot make a 4-plex or 6-plex if it is in transit oriented area or TOA, or which is typically within 800 meters from a Skytown station or 400 meters from a major bus loop like your Newton Exchange or Scottsdale Exchange or the Guildford bus loop. So yes, you can make a mid-rise, high-rise apartment building in those TOAs, but you cannot make a 4-plex or a 6-plex. And this is huge. So you need to make sure, if your plan is to develop anything yourself just on your specific lot, let's say a 4-plex or 6-plex, do not buy in a TOA or a transit oriented area. If you want to make more money, let's say, and you're willing to take the risk that your neighbors will be okay with the land assembly, then you can buy within the 800 meters of the Skytown station. Quickly talk about the normal RF, or which is converted to R3 now zone. If it's bigger than acreage, you can only make 2 houses on it. You cannot make a 3-plex, 4-plex. Of course, if it's within the normal 3,000 to 1 acre, you can make 4-plex, or of course 6-plex if it is near the frequent bus stop areas. And of course, if it's within the TOA, you cannot make 4-plex or 6-plex. You can only make 2 houses, or of course an apartment building if you do a land assembly. Subdivision requirements are still the same for RF, which is converted to R3. It's the same, almost 6,000 square feet lot and 50-foot frontage with a 91 feet depth. This is the same exact one as a typical RF zone lot. Let's talk about the FAR, or floor area ratio, or the size of the building that you can build on a typical R3 lot now. So for a single family dwellings or a house, which again pretty much no one will be building nowadays, this is the same exact one as the RF. So 0.6 for the first 6,000 square feet and then 0.35 for the remaining. This is exactly the one that used to be for RF zoned lot. And for a duplex or a houseplex, you are allowed 1 FAR for the first 6,000 square feet and 0.6 for the remaining. So let's say for a typical 7,200 square foot Surrey lot with a 60-foot frontage, you're allowed 6,000 square feet for the first 6,000, and then around 720 for the remaining 1,200 square feet. So in total, you're allowed to build around 6,700 square feet building if you're building, let's say, a duplex or a houseplex. Let's talk about the setbacks now quickly. So again, feel free to pause and take a look for the specifics, but for a single family house, it's 6.5 meters from the front and 7.5 meters from the back. And this is, of course, if it has a lane, and if it doesn't have a lane, it's the same. But for a duplex, it's 0.5 meters lesser setback from the front. And for a houseplex, it's crazy. It's only 3.5 meters. So the houseplex will be very close to the actual lot line. And of course, a houseplex or a coach house is not permitted if the house does not have a lane. Let's quickly talk about the R4 zoning now, which is a smaller 4,500 square feet lots. Same exact one, 3,000 square feet to 1 acre. You can make 4-plex up to 6-plex. And for the subdivision, it's the same as the RF13, RF12. You can make around 3,600 square feet lot. And of course, there's type 1 and type 2. There used to be type 3 as well for RF13, but they've just narrowed it down to RF type 1 and type 2. 12 meters and 28 meters, 12 meters frontage, 28 meters depth. And R5 is of course the smallest tiny lots with the back lane. Same exact 3,000 square feet to 1 acre. You can build 4plex and 6plex. Of course, this is bigger than 3,000 square feet. So this is not the, you can only make a triplex if it's smaller than 3,000 square feet. But R5 are still bigger, slightly bigger. And of course, subdivision requirements. This one does have 1, 2, and 3. And feel free to take a look. You can pause and take a look of how big you can make. But of course, keep in mind, this is only if you have a back lane. Quickly talk about frequent bus stop areas. So it's not all the busy roads that have this FTN or the frequent transit network. It's only on Scott Road, 128, King George, 104, and Fraser Highway. And within 400 meters of each bus stop station, let's say on 120th, you can make a 6plex, and you don't even need to have any garages or any parking spaces. So let's say 200 meters on right, 200 meters on the left side. This is, let's say, 120th. This is up to 118th, and this is up to 122nd. So like 2 and 2 streets on left and right side. Again, you can make a 6plex. You do not need to give any parking space. And of course, a disclaimer, these are not yet passed. They will be passed on, I think, June 26th, and June 30th is when it will be announced to the public. So you can make a decision quickly based on the information I've given you today. My best suggestion would be, if you're not looking for a super long-term plan of, let's say, making more money, try to avoid the TOA areas and focus on the frequent transit network areas around, let's say, 120th, 136, or King George, and 128, and within the 400 meter radius, because you can make a 6plex and you don't even need permission from neighbors or even a land assembly, right? So try to get anything closer to 120th, 128, 104, the Fraser Highway, and you can hopefully make a 6plex and make some money. Bye.